Although it's been 20 years since the Crystal Lake killer, the shadow of the Crystal Lake murder still lingers in the mind of James, a local resident. That day, he saw Jason again in his dream, which made him even more convinced that the killer Jason still existed and that he was hiding around Crystal Lake. He grabbed his weapon and drove to the lakefront marina. He looked around, but he didn't see anything. But when he looked down, he saw him in the lake's reflection. James was so angry, he fired a shot into the lake. He realized he was hallucinating, but the sound of the shot alerted the old sheriff on patrol. Then the old sheriff arrived and told him Jason had been dead for years. He mustn't keep living in the past. He had to learn to look forward. But James was convinced that Jason couldn't be dead. He gave the man a polite gesture of greeting and left. There was a man hiding behind a tree. He was watching them. It's Jack the Explorer. While Jack was talking to himself for the camera, a figure suddenly appeared behind him, and as soon as he turned his head, he disappeared again. And when the night came, a couple is now seeking excitement in their tent. Suddenly, there's the sound of a branch snapping outside. They thought it was a small animal passing through the forest, so they didn't pay any attention to it. They continued to prepare for their next move, but then there was another heavy sound. The long-haired man's interest was disturbed, so he poked his head out to look outside, and there on the ground was Jack, who had made the video during the day. The long-haired man went to wake him up unexpectedly. The first thing Jack said when he woke up was that he wanted them to leave. The long-haired man didn't know what was going on, but Jack ran away. The long-haired man turns around and tells the woman that everything is fine, and then he's stabbed in the back with a knife. The woman opens the tent and sees the bloody man staring into her eyes. Later at the hospital, James received a report from a park ranger. A visitor has been injured at Camp Crystal Lake. They need an ambulance to take them to the hospital. So James, the ambulance driver, grabbed two ants. James, the ambulance driver, grabbed two ants, and they rushed to the designated location to meet the female agent. To James' surprise, the female agent said the victim was alone on the ground. However, unbeknownst to James, the female agent was attacked as soon as she returned to the car. The noise she made for a split second alerted James. However, the injured man in the ambulance was making even louder wailing noises, so his attention was diverted. It turns out the ants were cleaning his wounds. The car leaves without a sound. James didn't realize anything was wrong behind him until he got back into his driver's seat, and Jason slowly walked up to his window. James saw him and tried to reach for his gun, but Jason didn't give him a chance. The older James was no match for Jason. Soon he was on the ground, wounded, and he saw James struggle to get up and climb into the car. While Jason was still trying to make a move on the injured man in the car, he rushed to start the car and left. Just when James thought he was safe, he started to report the accident to the hospital. Jason suddenly appeared, and what will the old sheriff, who has found multiple bodies, do to Jason next? The man in the hospital bed woke up from a nightmare to find the murderer from his dream, Jason, standing outside his window. Jason, the murderer from his dream, is standing right outside his window. He was terrified. Jason breaks the window and rolls into the room, but the man was already wounded. All he could do was crawl on his hands as best he could until he saw a pair of hands reaching for him. The man saw that it was James, the ambulance driver from the hospital. He was just hallucinating what had just happened. The story was the same as always. Anyone who's seen Jason's brutality, they're all scared and hallucinating. And the reason why James came to Jack, he wanted him to take him to Jason's lair. It turns out that after James managed to escape from Jason, he wanted to know how Jack got hurt. Then he found a video in Jack's backpack. Everywhere he's been since Jack came to Camp Crystal Lake, everywhere he went, he recorded it on video. One of the videos was shot in a cabin, in which Jake accidentally sees the skull of Jason's mother in a box. In a box, Jason's mother's skull, and it was this skull that James was looking for Jack to destroy. Jason, who should have drowned, was brought back to life when his mother was killed. He became immortal. Jason's mother is his spirit. Destroying her skull would send him to hell. Jack was convinced by James. He was willing to show James the way to the cabin. He was accompanied by Diana. Years ago, Diana's son was brutally murdered by Jason, and it's a story that stuck with her. But as soon as they stepped off the elevator at the hospital, they were blocked by a group of armed police. Turns out the old sheriff suspected James of killing the others because he was the last one to escape alive, and he's been acting crazy lately. James tried to explain that it was Jason who killed all the people, but the old sheriff didn't believe him. Jack stepped forward to explain that he had actually seen Jason. The lights suddenly dimmed. They start to look around. A figure appeared on the wall, and he slowly stepped out. He wore a mask and carried a man's head in his hands. Everyone was shaking with fear. He began to kill. The few remaining people managed to escape from the hospital. They realized that the car outside had been vandalized, and Jason was slowly coming towards them. The old sheriff apologized for blaming James. Then he rushed out to confront Jason. He wanted to give James and the others a chance to escape. A few shots were fired, but Jason was unharmed. He just walked up slowly and took care of him. "You must go." James, at the last minute, put in the ambulance battery backup. He was able to start the car and leave. Jason didn't pursue the vehicle, but went to the pier at Crystal Lake. He jumped right into the water. James told Diana to drive outside and call for help. He and Jack went to destroy the skull as planned, but it was only after James followed Jack to the cabin. Their movements were seen by Jason, who was hiding behind a tree. They arrived at the house. Jack had just found the skull in the box. He had no time to destroy it when Jason appeared. They started fighting. James was knocked to the ground, but he picked up his pistol and shot Jason several times. But it was no use. Jason shoots at him with a bow and arrow. And that's when Diana came out. She took an axe and hit Jason right in the head. It turns out that Diana wanted to avenge her son's death so badly, so she didn't go outside the town to call for help like she was told. Jason, who had been chasing Jack, was nowhere to be found. James urged Jack to destroy the skull, but then Jason suddenly jumped out from behind Jack. He brought his knife down with a vengeance, but Jack was able to block it with her head. Jason lost his immortality, and they were able to destroy him. But then, in a trance, Jason sees the ghost of his mother, and she's calling Jason to come home with him. Behind him, James finally got his chance. He picked up the machete on the ground when Jason was not looking, and swung it. In a flash, blood splattered everywhere. Jason's head was separated from his body. His head flew into the air and fell into the Crystal Lake, and sank to the bottom of the lake, and James fainted on the ground due to the loss of blood. It was the next day. James, healed from his injuries, met with Jack at the pier. James was cleared of the murder because of Jack's video evidence. They hunted and celebrated. Peace has finally returned to Camp Crystal Lake, but will there ever be peace at Crystal Lake? Never Hike Alone is a creepy movie that transports the viewer into a world of fear and unease. From the beginning to the end of the movie, the audience is surrounded by a tense atmosphere. Every scene of it makes one's heart beat faster and dare not let down one's guard. First of all, the plot design of the movie is very attractive, and the storyline is tight and heart-wrenching. Secondly, the visual effects and sound design of the movie are excellent. The director utilizes a lot of dark tones and shadow effects to create a depressing and fearful atmosphere for the audience. The soundtrack is also very appropriate. Each piece of music is creepy and enhances the tension of the audience. Last but not least, the cast of the movie is excellent. The lead actors portrayed their roles in such a way that one could really feel their fear and desperation. Every expression and action is impressive, and the audience can help but empathize with them. Overall, Never Hike Alone is a very successful horror movie that brings the audience into a heart-wrenching world of horror that they can't help but resonate with. Not only does this movie provide the audience with an intense and exciting viewing experience, but it also makes you think deeply about the dark side of humanity and the nature of fear. Highly recommended for all those who love horror movies.